Hey everybody, apologies for the delayed video. Been on a much needed vacation with the family and some friends, but now it's time to get back to business. I just want to state right out of the gate that while I do enjoy the Mad Max franchise, I'm not an overly dedicated fan. And to be completely honest, I had my reservations about Furiosa, mainly since it's so far removed from the release of Fury Road. And while that film was extremely well received by critics and the audience alike, and even I myself enjoyed that movie a ton, it feels as though the hype for any sequels or prequels have sort of fizzled out. Like, subscribe, comment down below, and tell a friend if you haven't. And if you're new here, check out the rest of the channel and let me know what you think. Let's dive into Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. Alright, so I'm just going to jump right in. I'm fully aware that this film has been overly praised by critics and fans, and I respect that. It's an insanely well-made movie. However, I didn't love this movie. And let me clarify that this movie is good and I enjoyed it, but to me, I just didn't think it lived up to the hype of its reviews. My main complaint of this film is that it just sort of feels unnecessary. It doesn't really add much to the lore of this universe other than taking details and story threads introduced in Fury Road and stretching them out into a 2-hour plus film. I enjoy Furiosa's character in Fury Road, and I enjoyed the character in this movie as well. I just don't think I needed, nor wanted, a whole film on her backstory that we already learned from the previous outing. Now, I will say, Furiosa is different than all of the previous installments in this franchise. This film is divided into chapters, which is a first. This story also feels more coherent than the rest, which for some viewers may be beneficial. It seems like it's more accessible to a larger audience. The Mad Max franchise has always stood out for the sort of erratic and vague nature in which it tells its stories. This franchise seems to always throw you into its narrative in the midst of an already unfolding series of events. They never contain a lot of dialogue, and they intentionally withhold details as to not bore the audience with plot exposition, so they can decipher the story on their own. And for me, I've always enjoyed that aspect. I don't need to be spoon-fed key details. Cinema is a visual medium after all. That being said, I can see how Furiosa may appeal to a wider audience because of the more open and mainstream nature of its story. What I did absolutely love about Furiosa was the action, cinematography, and the acting. Chris Hemsworth is incredible in this film. He disappears into the role of the villain Dementis. With Hemsworth, I think because we have become so familiar with his performances in the MCU that we forget how good of an actor he truly is. I adore Hemsworth in roles like this, where he is allowed to let his imagination and his abilities just run wild. It reminded me a lot of his character in Bad Times at the El Royale. He chews up every bit of scenery, delivering his dialogue with an inflection pulled right from the mouth of his own grandfather, all while sporting a hilarious fake nose. My only issue with this character is that he just sort of disappears for a chunk of this film, and during that whole portion, there are things in motion that we don't see that cause his downfall as the leader of Gastown. I totally understand because this is Furiosa's film after all, but it was just an odd choice that he is the catalyst for her journey, and there's a large chunk where he's just gone. Anya Taylor-Joy does a fantastic job of embodying Charlize Theron's original performance while also making this role her own. She's fearless and powerful. While she doesn't have a ton of dialogue like Tom Hardy in Fury Road, she achieves so much with just her facial expressions alone, and that's a sign of a great actress. The action in Furiosa is as good as it was in Fury Road, In classic Mad Max fashion, we are treated to many desert chase scenes involving large rigs, motorcycles, and classic cars souped up to fit the post-apocalyptic world that this franchise resides in. Like usual, it's just so much fun to watch these scenes play out. George Miller remains committed to using as much practical effects and stunt work as possible, and it shows. The camera work in these sections, along with the cinematography in general, is incredibly well done. There are so many gorgeous shots in this film, and somehow in every shot, Miller and his crew are able to somehow make the desert look more and more enticing. The set designs and the costume designs are phenomenal, as they have been since this series' inception. Miller really created his own signature style with the debut installment, and has continued to build upon it. Still, after all of these years, he continues to impress with his unique set pieces and refreshing wardrobes. There really isn't another franchise that boasts a signature like this one. I'm glad I was able to get out and see Furiosa, because this really is a film that deserves to be seen on the big screen. It's a spectacle, and the home setup wouldn't do it justice. There are so many aspects of this movie that are exceptional, but where it loses me is in its story. I think had Furiosa remained guarded and her backstory mysterious in Fury Road, then this film would have made more sense. To me, it just feels sort of redundant, and I totally understand for those who are much more invested in this IP than I am. I can see them being more interested in seeing this origin story play out. For me, though, not being a diehard Mad Max fanatic, I could have really taken it or left it. But since Miller put in so much time to craft this vision, I'm happy I gave it a watch. It was worth it for Hemsworth and the action alone. I know he's discussed making another prequel to Fury Road, highlighting Max's story post Thunderdome, but based on Furiosa's disappointing performance, I'm skeptical that he'll get that opportunity, and to be honest, I'm not really clamoring for it. That being said, if Miller remains adamant at continuing this franchise, and is successful in producing another entry, I'll be there to see it. And if this does end up being the final chapter, then I'm okay with that too.